Hey, wait a minute. I know grieving is about loss, but can loss sometimes be a win? We should talk about it on this next episode of the Gratitude Journal. I'll be right there. I got to voice this stuff. Okay. Another wet t-shirt contest? You know, if 2024 taught me anything, it's that this gratitude thing is not for the weak. It's not often that I've come across people throughout my decades on the planet that have lost both their mother and their father in less than a month. I'm not doing this. I'm just saying that this is not something that you come across too often. And it makes me wonder, as this grief process continues, whether I'm actually making any progress. And so I thought in today's episode of the Gratitude Journal, we might go over a couple of things and see if it's possible just to kind of reach out and touch gratitude. Welcome back, friend, to this, I believe, the third installment of the Gratitude Journal. Just like the audio podcast, the video podcast, vlog, whatever we're calling this, is designed, hopefully, to maybe showcase gratitude in a little different light and maybe make you and I a little more cognizant of the things around us that we should be grateful for. And as I've done throughout over 100 episodes of the audio version of the Gratitude Journal podcast, which I believe I have assembled in a playlist because that's what we do here in the YouTube universe. We put things in playlists so the YouTube algorithm can do its magic and its wonders and however it does its thing. And so while I've been pedaling my bicycle in the morning, going through my regular training regimen, I've thought of how this YouTube algorithm is supposed to get the stuff out there, and I still haven't figured it out. So I'm trying to teach myself, and hopefully, as you peruse the various things that you peruse over the YouTube universe, that gratitude will be one of those things that you kind of happen upon, and maybe you and I can get to know each other. So throughout the episode today, if you would, like the episode and then subscribe would be even better. And then you and I can go on this journey together. And I do believe that it is a journey. And I wanted to just maybe mention three things very briefly about the whole experience of loss and how maybe loss can be a win. And if you stick around to the end, I have kind of an extra bonus thought that I want to throw your way, courtesy of Reverend Father Thomas Thompson from way back when in a previous life that I lived. And I'll get to that here in just a little bit. I feel like going forward here in 2025 that I am no more equipped to talk about the loss of my parents and trying to assimilate that sense of loss into some semblance of a daily lifestyle. And I'm reminded so often about, my parents and everything they've tried to show us and to teach us. And one of the things that was very apparent to me that I'm very grateful for from my parents is the fact that I think, number one, that we learn our life lessons from our parents, or we can learn our life lessons from our parents, or take their example to heart and hopefully learn from it. And As some of you know who have followed the audio version of the podcast, my wife Donna, my beautiful artist wife Donna, and I are and have been on this Alzheimer's journey. And the journey is one that is fraught with a number of potholes. We were riding down one of the main streets here in Akron, and it was like a video game. I mean, we're like dodging, manhole covers and potholes. You know how they scrape the surface of a road and the pothole is kind of sitting up, and it doesn't matter whether it's a pothole or a manhole cover, it's going to rip your front end off. And so as I was kind of dodging, the minefields along this main road, you can imagine, what the side streets look like in this town, especially in winter. I said to Donna, wow, this is like being on some wild journey of like dodging an asteroid field. And, she kind of laughed and said she agreed with me. And I thought about this while I was riding my bicycle, trying to figure out the YouTube algorithm. The journey sometimes is fraught with kind of the unexpected bumps. Now, I know I'm not telling you anything new, but I think when you are confronted with these bumps, it all depends on how you react and respond to them. And I remember my father was he was a teacher, and he, for the most part, was the sole breadwinner. I mean, my mother did all the things that moms do as the domestic engineer of the household and a family with 7 kids. And so she had her own chores and tasks to deal with. And my father, when he wasn't teaching in the summer, would take on all of these jobs. And I can remember, and as we were standing around the corpse of my father before they took him away to the funeral home, which was amazing in its own right. The fact that we kind of huddled together as siblings and just talked about what he meant to our family. And I kept thinking about this little auto parts truck that he would drive up in the driveway in the middle of the afternoon. And it was just one of these many jobs. And, he would wave to me, and I'd be out there, mowing the lawn with one of those old, mowers, like the push mowers, which was kind of a hip thing to have maybe several years ago. At least people down in the neighborhood had them, like they were, lawnmowers that you had that didn't, use any gas, and, you wanted to be, environmentally, conscious. And, we had one because that was the only kind of lawnmower we had. But I remember mowing that lawn and my father coming home and, in his Napa Auto Parts shirt, because that was his job for the summer, one of his jobs for the summer. And he would run in the house, and my mother would have like a sandwich prepared for him. And, he would sort of wolf down this sandwich, and he would, run back out to the truck. And in the span of me doing 2 rows up and down, the lawn, he had already, consumed his lunch and was off doing what he needed to do. And we were kind of standing around on the day that he passed away and recounting all of these jobs that he had. And almost every one of my siblings remarked that, the gratitude level for the amount of commitment that he had to, do what was necessary, to do whatever it takes. And everybody felt, especially the other siblings who have children. I do not have children that I know of, but they all felt like that example helped them to be better parents. This kind of selfless, do what's necessary to do. And I don't know, just riding my stationary bike the other day, it just this overwhelming, very emotional wave just kind of hit me. And I just felt so much gratitude for that example that he set. I don't know what your routine is in the morning, but mine over the last several years has been to have a grapefruit. I read that grapefruits are supposed to be good for you, then I read they're not supposed to be good for you. I like grapefruits, and so I'm going to continue to eat a grapefruit in the morning. It's kind of how I break my fast in the morning, is my grapefruit. And before I get my day rolling, that's kind of what I do. I eat a grapefruit. And I'm reminded of my mother, this little thing that she used to do for all of us, is that she would take a small little paring knife and she would cut the grapefruit in half. And then she would take the little paring knife and she would microscopically and surgically cut each of the slices from its sheath, as it were. And so it would be easy for us when we got out of bed and came downstairs. She would have a half a grapefruit on a little plate for all of us and a spoon, and it would be easy for us to take the little grapefruit slice out of its sheath. And to add her, motherly flair, she would take a little dribble of sugar and she would just sprinkle it, just a little wisp all over the half of the grapefruit. And to this day, while I'm standing there at the sink eating my grapefruit in the morning, I keep thinking about my mother taking that knife and taking the time to surgically slice like a pizza, each side of the slice, so that our spoon could easily go into that grapefruit and we would be able to eat it. And then the sugar would take off just a little bit of that tart. And as I'm eating my grapefruit, I think I should slice this up because it'd be a hell of a lot easier to eat. But as I'm digging my way through it, I think of how amazing it was that she would wake up that early to cut that slice of grapefruit so that we would be able to easily enjoy it in the morning. And I just lately have had an amazing and overarching sense of gratitude for the fact that she would actually do that for us. The third thing that I've kind of been thinking about lately is something along, I guess, a spiritual line. And as I do my Sunday morning thing, I don't know what your ritual is for enjoying Sunday morning, aside from dividing my time between being a pretty bad Catholic. I sometimes sort of favor the Eastern spiritual tradition. And there are a couple of Zen, Buddhist, Dharma teachers who I enjoy watching, and I'll put my headphones on and I'll sort of unfurl my iPad and enjoy, a teaching talk, a Dharma talk, trying to gather, something about it. And hopefully that Sunday morning is spent, in a spirit of gratitude by, appreciating all of the wisdom that they have and all the time that went into being somebody who's going to, transmit, this knowledge to some lunkhead, sitting in the kitchen before he enjoys his first cup of coffee in the morning. And one of the things that has kind of come to the forefront for me is in the midst of a tough work week and a week trying to run a business that in this past week has suffered, a big a pothole, has fallen into a big bump on the road. And I'll get to that maybe in another episode because I'm still trying to process that, this sense of loss. And it seems like it has played a central part. And while I'm watching these Dharma talks and trying to gather something from it or to learn something from it, I'm kind of struck by the fact that, in the spirit of losing something, we oftentimes, feel dejected, and we wonder if we're going to be able to overcome this loss. And while I was listening to a talk, I just really felt a lot of pain about my parents' death. And in particular, because I'd finished doing a video for my parish where I was able to fly my drone inside the church. And it was just a thrill to be able to be inside this church that I grew up with. And even though, again, I'm not the greatest Catholic in the world, I do still have, a deep sort of mystical sense of, what that's meant to me growing up. And, it was a thrill being inside. But as I was flying the drone, I kind of kept thinking that, really hasn't been 3 months since, we were here for my father's funeral. And then less than a month later, we were here for my mother's funeral. And it's almost like, I'm sure you feel this way from time to time, that the wave of the angst and the emotion is almost like too much for you to handle. And that's kind of how I was feeling while I was listening to this Dharma talk. And I felt like at the end of the talk that I had kind of weathered that wave. And I know that sounds odd, but I feel, and maybe my siblings feel this way, or maybe you felt this way too if you've ever experienced, that kind of loss. But it feels like there's been like these little challenges and maybe like these little victories. And I feel like sometimes the overarching sense of loss maybe can turn up to be a win from time to time. And I feel like the win for me that day was to look at that experience of feeling grief for that period of time, and standing there, inside that church with my drone. I felt like a sense of acknowledgement that it was there. And I think sometimes just acknowledging something is kind of like a good step. I don't know if it's a first step, because I don't know that it's the first time that I've experienced it, but, people in recovery will say, just acknowledging the fact that you need to be in recovery is like the first step. So I don't know if it was a first step, but it was certainly something that now when I look back on the film that I produced, trying to get better with a drone. I'm kind of new to the world of drones, and I'm sort of fascinated by them. And the whole experience was just so, like, I almost feel myself getting emotional just thinking about, being inside that church and trying to somewhat master something so I didn't, crash a drone into the fourth station of the cross. Which, could have been very detrimental to the whole experience. I might not even be here talking about it. But I feel like these little moments are moments that I can be grateful for, both for the feeling of loss and maybe for the small victory in trying to sort of circumvent, the loss, so that it means something even more important than your parents mean to you. So I feel like those are three things that have sort of been on the journey lately in this trying to understand losing not one but two people who, make up your whole world and are responsible for bringing you into this world. And so for those things, I've been very, very grateful. What happens if we can't find the gratitude? And what happens if we don't look for it hard enough? And maybe we don't devote enough time to it. And I recall when I was in the Catholic seminary, I studied to be a priest. There was a professor, and his name was Tommy Thompson. And Father Thompson was a professor of history, but he enjoyed coming through the refectory, which I learned later was actually the cafeteria. But doesn't refectory sound cooler than cafeteria? And he would wander through the refectory, and he would just walk up to a table and he would say, "What are you reading?" And the first inclination was to say, "What do you mean, what am I reading?" No, what are you reading? Not textbooks. What are you reading? And I remember someone at the table said, "I just don't have time to read." And he said, "Well, if you just don't have time to read, do me a favor and do the work of art, whether it's fiction, whether it's a historical, a volume, do them both a favor and just touch them. Just reach out and touch the spine of the book. Even if you can't read it, just touch it. That is better than doing nothing at all." And I've been thinking about that from Father Tommy Thompson, about just touching it. So there it is. Hey, if you get any value from these thoughts on gratitude, please, like and subscribing would be amazing. I'd love to hear from you, especially your comments about what you're doing lately as far as gratitude and loss. And thank you for tuning in and watching and subscribing to another episode of the Gratitude Journal.